Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the session on broadening energy access through innovation. My name is Salvatore Vinci. I'm the Head of Partnerships and Technical Advisory Services in IRENA, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this session. Energy access has been at the heart of IRENA activities in the past years. I remember in 2012 we organized the first International Off-Grid Renewable Energy Conference with the Alliance for Electrification. I'm happy Marcos is here. And since that conference has been impressive, the development of the off-grid renewable energy sector. Both standalone and mini-grid, now they are not at the sideline of electrification. They are more and more perceived as a key component of the electrification strategies in many countries. This massive development has been possible and has been generated certainly from the decreasing cost of renewable energy, but also by significant innovation. And that's what we will discuss today. Innovation in many aspects, certainly in terms of technology, and we know and I'm sure will emerge from the discussion the importance of mobile payment, the importance of digitalization, the importance of quality standard, but also innovation in terms of regulations. A couple of years ago, we published a report on policy regulation to support private sector in mini-grid. And we analyzed the key development in terms of tariff regulation, licensing procedures, grid arrival, what happened when the grid arrived, and access to finance. Now, that report is already old. There are so many developments in many countries that we are working now on a new, on an update of that report. So innovation has been key. Of course, it's not enough. Still 1 billion people worldwide are without electricity access, so we need to increase. But the positive aspect emerged also in the recent discussion regarding the SDGs, and I'm very happy that Dr. Takada will deliver a presentation on SDGs, is that it's clear now that we don't have to think anymore about the kilowatt hour only, but the use of the kilowatt hour. If we look, for example, at the agri-food chain, 30% of the global energy demand is for the agri-food sector. And let's think about the impressive support that off-grid renewable energy system can have in water pumping or in food preservation and processing. But another example, health. 1 billion people worldwide are served by health centers that don't have access to electricity. Also in this case, it's amazing the impact that renewable energy, that off-grid renewable energy, that innovation can have. Innovation not also in terms of efficiency and efficient appliances. Again, in this case, efficient appliances can play a crucial role, and the link between off-grid renewables and productive uses can really make the difference. So the challenge ahead is huge, but there are also many positive developments. I would also like to take this opportunity that, as I mentioned before, the first off-grid conference was held in 2012. The fourth one will be held on 31 October and 1st November in Singapore, again with the friends of the Alliance for Electrification, which will organize an exhibition. And the conference will also include the outcome of this discussion. So I very much look forward to this discussion. I thank all the speakers, and I thank also Dr. Bimar Mahendru for moderating this session. And I will leave the floor to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Salvatore. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you are interested in electricity access, and if you are interested in innovative ways to take electricity access to the next level, you're in the right place, because we have a great panel. We have excellent speakers over here for you today. And if you're still interested in electricity access and you're interested in innovative solutions and you're not in this room, gosh, you're really missing something. So let the message go out to the others that they're really missing something if they're not in this space and time with us. To start off, we have with us Dr. Minoru Takada, who is going to share his view from the United Nations. Dr. Takada spearheads the UN Department of Economics and Social Affairs efforts in reviewing, following, and implementing SDG 7. So he's the master and guru who sees it right there happening. For those who may not know, he's actually seen the whole spectrum because he's a PhD in renewable energy applications, and also he's a master's in nuclear technology. So I think he's seen the whole thing. So I invite especially Dr. Takada to come and share his views and his presentation, please. After that, we'll get into the panel discussion and I'll invite the panelists. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Takada. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's so kind to be sort of inviting me to come and make some presentation on this one. So I think SDGs, you are very familiar now, 17 of them. I don't go one by one. It might embarrass you, it might embarrass me if I don't know even one of them. But I can tell you that this may be challenging for you. How many targets do you think we have under 17 goals? Does anyone know by heart? How many targets? Nope. Don't worry. 169. Now even more challenging. How many indicators massive governments, member states set to keep track of 169 targets? Lucky that they were a little more reasonable. 230, and it keeps changing. So I think you can see that magnitude of the sort of effort involved in setting up 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but also the effort to keep track of the progress toward SDGs are enormous. There's a good thing. Good thing is that energy is one of them. You remember that the predecessor of Sustainable Development Goals called Millennium Development Goals, energy was not one of the 8 goals. Now, in the 17 goals, for the first time in the history of United Nations, we have a universally agreed goal on energy, which are sort of, essentially sort of these 3 major components. One, ensuring universal energy access, but in 2 ways. One, make sure everybody has electricity, but also clean cooking solutions. Second, increasing significantly renewable energy. And third, doubling the rate of improvement in energy efficiency. Those are the 3 sort of pillars of energy goals. Good, having targets, but not so good where we stand. According to the current trends already described, we're not doing good enough. Electricity, I think there's going to be a lot of sort of movement, and this is exactly what this panel is going to be talking about. 1 billion people roughly do not have currently access to electricity. And then according to the current trend, 670 million, much of them is going to be in sub-Saharan Africa again, will be without electricity at the time of 2030. This is based on the current trend. 3 billion people still cook based on traditional the fuels. And then, current trends are not good enough. 2.3 billion will be, again, using the same thing in 2030. So I think we are very good in setting the targets, goal on energy, and it was very successful, but not good enough in terms of implementing it. And this is a chance to see whether we can actually do differently. And this is sort of situation is obviously impacting a lot with regard to the macro pictures. And some of them already started being talked about in the previous speakers. 4 million people, roughly, annually dying because of the cooking smokes. WHO meticulously documented over many, many years, and this is in fact increasing. So it's a very worrying trend, and this is due to inefficient cooking practices. 90% of the populations globally are affected by air pollution, and inefficient use of energy is a major contributor. We have to do something about it. 300 million people, students, are actually sort of attending the primary school without electricity as of now. 0.2% of the global energy investment is gone to the least developed countries, according to one estimate published in 2015. So the LDC covers 47 countries, population-wise about 2% of the global population, but they're benefiting only 0.2% of the global investment in sustainable energy sector. So that's clearly a worrying sign in terms of inefficiency and inequalities. Because of unreliable electricity supply, blackouts, 2% of GDP is compromised in Africa. And then the greenhouse gas emissions. This one may be a good sign in that if we sort of implement renewable-based solution, which is getting cheaper and cheaper, the good sort of story is that we may not have to too much worry about GHG emissions coming from the universal energy access. So this is a sort of the positive sort of indication. But then this depends on how we do universal energy access over the coming years. Can we do it? We are already 3 years into the SDG process and 12 years left to go. And I do not know. I would like to hear answer from the panelists today. Can we do it? But let me sort of lay 6 points here. Leadership. Last 2 decades have seen enormous amount of efforts to extend electricity. About 1 billion population have got electricity in last 2 decades. India alone, with the leadership, 500 million people have got electricity. So I think if there is a determined leadership, you can do it. And there's a sort of examples that you can find and follow. That's a good sign. Off-grid innovation. This is the topic of this conference we have seen, and I'm quite encouraged to see so many things happening on the part of the decentralized renewable energy solution, lots of different type of technologies at a cheaper price, but also sort of digitalization is giving new tools, new business models, and the potential new platforms such as the blockchain, which might help overcome the barrier that we have been facing, such as sort of additional financing solutions. Affordability, it is getting cheaper and cheaper, not just a large one, but also smaller ones. Again, renewable energy is the center of that. But 3 other things are quite challenging. Clean cooking solutions, I don't see enthusiasm, I don't see commitment, I don't see as large number of innovations happening in this sector. Why? I want to know it, and I want to hear from entrepreneurs why nobody wants to be seriously investing in this one. Right now, about 95% in the investment in clean energy solutions are coming from the public sector. Can we change it? How? I don't know. But I want to hear your ideas as to how to do it, because 3 billion people are still doing this sort of dirty cooking things, and we have to change it. And then I'll tell you later on how UN is trying to work it out on that one. SDG implications. Let's say, according to the IRENA estimate, for example, 25 million people, million jobs are going to be created because of the expansion of the renewable energy sector in the world. But what does that mean? In the world where 2030 we'll have 8.5 billion population globally, which is 1 billion plus from now. In Africa, we'll have a 1.3 billion population. And then in Africa alone, 500 million additional youth are going to be injected into the sector during the next 10 years. Are we going to get sufficient jobs for them? In Arab region, for example, unemployment rate for the youth is 30%. This sort of massive expansion of renewable energy, are we going to see a positive implication to address this big challenge? Otherwise, okay to have universal access, but we don't know whether we are actually doing good enough for the society. So I think we really need to think about many of the implications around the range of topics covered by Sustainable Development Goals. Governance, it's a huge challenge. Let's say since 2000, 97% of the population, 97% of the population who got new electricity came from grid-based solutions. On the other hand, estimates show that from now onward, 60% of the new additions and the electricity additions is going to be done most sort of cheapest way if it is for off-grid decentralized solutions. And then you can see a massive sort of diverse technologies coming up right now. So what does it mean in terms of governance structure, whereby we are seeing increasing diversity, increasing decentralization, increasing digitalizations, yet we are seeing legacy-rich sector in a world that is constrained by climate change. How does energy sector governance should look like? And what is it that the international community can actually help governments to be able to design their enabling framework in a way that is amenable to the future sort of system changes that they want for the populations? This is a massive challenge that we really need to see, and this cannot be sort of something that many of the developing countries, like African countries, can actually escape. Yet I don't know whether the international system has been fully equipped and aligned to supporting this discussion so far. So I think this is one of the things that I really want to see. And I think I commend IRENA for having this sort of conference. This is exactly the type of conversation that we want to have so that we sort of share the information and the latest knowledge with each other. And I think that everybody is benefiting, and certainly UN is committed to be supporting this kind of sort of exchanges to happen moving forward. United Nations continue to keep monitoring and sharing sort of progress on the SDGs. And every year in July at United Nations high-level political forum, which is a gathering of all UN member states, meet and discuss progress toward all SDGs. And they pick up few goals every year. This year, one of the goals was SDG 7 on energy. So we did an exercise, thanks to also to IRENA for contribution. It came out exactly the way that I described. I think there's enormous challenges, but also enormous opportunities. Now, but the feeling is mixed. Can we actually make it happen in 12 years? I think it's an enormous challenge, but I personally think that it is probably that the time now that we can say that we may be seeing the beginning of end of energy poverty now. But I think whether we can actually deploy those sort of tools and solutions in a way that is going to make things happen in time for SDGs goal, I think this is up to us. And then I look forward to having this conversation with the panel members. Thank you very much.
Dr. Takada, I think that was truly an eye-opener, and I wish I could continue to sit in the audience and listen to you rather than coming here trying to even moderate a session like this one. This session, while we talk of innovations, but to remain focused, it's purely going to be about electricity access, and we will be discussing purely areas of development, deployment, and dissemination of those innovations. What do we really need to do? And I think, Dr. Takada, I have to once again thank you because you really shook us and woke us up. Frankly, my lack of knowledge, I was not even aware that there are 169 indicators that we need to follow. And that's a huge task. That's by no means small. But I think if we can really unleash the entrepreneur in our society, if we can bring the innovation to the fore and share that innovation openly and transparently across regions, across geographies, across countries, across strata, I think we would have addressed the challenge that we are facing. And I think that's the point you were making in your concluding remarks. May I now take the liberty of inviting the panelists, please, to join me on the dais. Ms. Habiba Ali, Julie Camel, Jan Kloin, Babakar Diallo, Martin Healy, Matthew Monnier, Shalmit Theory, and Marcus Wayman. Please join me here any way you like. Thank you. Yeah, please. Yes. You have to come here, Dr. Takada, please. So may I especially invite you, given that you have such a high-powered panel here, and the focus is innovation, so they're going to be bringing out some of the innovations that they have seen, they have practiced, they've brought up. And also, in our initial discussion, we shared about what not to do, what innovations don't work. I think they're going to talk about a bit about that also. So may I really encourage you to use the app. I hope most of you have the Attendify app installed. Please fire your questions to the panelists through that app so that they will all flash on this wonderful tablet I have, and I can bring them to the panelists. Now, let me pick up from where Dr. Takada had mentioned, and maybe this is an open question to all of you. We need to talk about entrepreneurship also. To start with, maybe from Marcus, going this way, if you could give a brief introduction of yourself, your organization, some of the innovations, and what you are doing to bring about some innovative solutions to electricity access. And we'll go through this panel from that side. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for the kind introduction. Thanks to IRENA for the invitation. Pleasure to be the first speaker, first time. Normally I'm at the end. So, but happy to introduce also, let's say, on a general level first, and those who are not familiar with the Alliance for Rectification. We have been established, 12 years ago, a bit more, and I think always with a vision to support already at that time on the forefront SDG goals, and this through entrepreneurial spirit. So most of our members, there are nearly 150, would come would represent the industry, the private sector, and increasingly, and that's interesting, startups to a large extent. And so what we see in terms of innovation, first of all, I think over 12 years, it's a lot. Yeah? I mean, now we speak meanwhile about, well, at that time, perhaps first electricity for consumption purposes. Meanwhile, it's for productive use. Different sizes, if it's Pico, if it's solar home system, if it's micro mini grids to a large extent. So in what context can we use them? What kind of financing models are there behind for the company, but also for those who will use these solutions? I guess there are a few companies here who will speak more about that, so I would not like to highlight that. But it shows that there's a lot of innovation because there's so much to offer. And we are working really in all continents, in all countries, and we see very different solutions, whatever is feasible in the respective environment. And I would just like to acknowledge in that way that, all these innovations somehow, as we speak here, have become mainstream in our roles, but not obviously everywhere outside. And this means that, of course, very often the players with whom we want to speak, which are the policymakers in the countries, need to well understand these innovations to make the right efforts to bring them into the right space. Or into the right situation for the purpose of upscaling. And so I mean, I would just be a bit provocative also from the start. I mean, there are a few other things,
yes.
but also not to say, okay, there are only solutions. Of course, there are also risks, but certainly I think one of the main elements, what I would call for, is that innovation should be more rewarded as such. So if innovation, those who take the risks, who take the time to invest into innovation, I think they should be rewarded for it. I mean, to attract more intelligence, especially to this sector. I mean, if we want to create a level playing field with players who should compete with the grid, with the fossils in the end. I mean, this needs really intelligent people to do this job. That is one piece, and it should not only reflect people from, as we are now here in Germany, from Europe. It should definitely be the local players who should take leadership and should be equipped with the resources to develop in that role. And the next thing, and I think this is very crucial, I think what we hear again and again from our members, also from a latest publication, which we'll launch in October, there's an event now in Vienna, especially on innovation and also on SMEs and startup and their roles and how to support them, is there a chance that we consider, and I'm now speaking especially about mini-grids and microgrids because it's a bit closer to our heart, there's also Gogla here, so to speak on other aspects on off-grid, can we consider micro and mini-grids not as infrastructure? That is a big question I'm putting here on the table, but I think if that is the place, I mean, then it will open a lot of doors to enable better financing opportunities, better regulation, who put that in place. So if it's about patient capital to come in, if it's about, well, the right tariffs to be there, et cetera, et cetera. Just would like to start with this to pave the ground for further arguments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Thierry, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this powerful panel. My name is Shelmit Dauri. I work with a company called Sunfunder. We are based in Nairobi, and we provide debt finance to solar businesses in emerging market, particularly focusing on Africa. We've been in the market for about 5 years, and we've worked with about 12 companies, about 30 companies, spanning across 12 countries, mostly in Africa. And we have unlocked about $40 million deployed to those markets. I mean, for the Europeans, $40 million may not be big, but for the markets we work in, it's a huge deal. When it comes to energy access, in terms of our role, we work with, it's a pretty young market where we work in, and we are sort of in a very a niche market whereby like the formal banking sector is not able to lend to these companies. So the sector needs funding that is innovative, that will be able to look at these businesses from as a business model by itself and not from the traditional banking angle. I personally came from traditional banking, working with SMEs. I love working with SMEs, which is what I'm currently doing, but specifically for energy access, specifically solar in East Africa. And of course, when it comes to where we are right now, there are some enablers that have led to the growth that we've seen in that area. And I know we still have a big goal to meet, 1 billion people without access. But things like mobile money, innovative finance, battery technology, and financiers like us being there in the market. And we also have other businesses that are, or other organizations that have supported the sector, like GIZ, we have others like ACF and the like. So having all those players in the market and just recognize these new business models is a big, I think, aspect in and leading to the growth in energy access. But of course, cook stove still remains quite a puzzle because it was preceded the new wave of solar products. So it's something that I also question why there has not been growth in access to clean cooking solutions.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Kamel. I'm the Program Manager of the Policy and Regulatory Environment Program at Gogla. Gogla is the voice of the off-grid lighting industry, and we've got about 135 members from all across the world. Most of those members are from the manufacturing and distributing sort of sectors for off-grid solar products, but like ARE, we've also got our range of sort of associate members from donor organisations and all of those others working in energy access. Gogla really focuses on scaling up access through the provision of high-quality products, and that's sort of one of the big focal points of Gogla. I think innovation for me is exciting for 2 reasons. One is that innovation has allowed, access to electricity has previously relied on very expensive and very time-consuming grid infrastructure projects that often take years to build. Whereas off-grid solar has been enabled through technological innovation as well as through business model innovation to deliver energy services to people much cheaper and much faster than any of those grid services could ever in the past or could in the future. I think it's allowing a delivery of energy services that can be tailored to the budget, the needs and the wants of the people. It's a real sort of consumer-centric focus of the delivery of energy services and focusing on the services that are required rather than just the connection to the grid being the be-all and the end-all. I think this is a really exciting development. And the second point for innovation that I think is kind of looking at this from the other way is the innovative approaches that people who have been newly electrified through off-grid solar, the innovative approaches they've taken to improve their livelihoods and improve their household income. Gogla released a study recently called Powering Opportunities, which was looking at the innovation that's occurring within households who now have access to electricity, looking at the income generating opportunities. And it found that just within the 3 months of people connecting to a solar home system, 60% of them were undertaking some sort of additional economic activity. And of those who were earning an income, the average income increase was about $35 a month for that household. So it's absolutely not insignificant. So that's sort of, I think, what I think about when I think about innovation in the off-grid sector.
Thank you. Matthew?
Hello. I'm Mathieu. I'm in charge of the microgrid activity within Schneider Electric. So for those who don't know Schneider Electric, we are not a German company. We used to be a French one. Now I can say we are a global company since France is less than 5% of our activity, and new economies are now really part of our portfolio. We are present in 130 countries, and I would say that most of the activities we are doing are done by the country, so are done locally. And so I've been in this role for the last, I think, so now 6 or 7 years. So it's something in the journey we have started quite early with a very ambitious, I won't say ambitious, but a very proactive energy access program. And I will speak mostly about technology innovation because we are technology geek, and this is a little bit part of our DNA. We really like technology innovation. And but when we say innovation is not only about the technology itself, it's really about the spirit. We are doing it with very, very small teams. So we do entrepreneur. We are internal startup within a big company. So it's the strength of a group plus the entrepreneurship. We are working a lot with partnership. We are taking a lot of risk, and sometimes we fail, and sometimes it succeeds. So we are really in this spirit. And about the technologies, a few things maybe I would like to say. When we started about this microgrid or off-grid, we started with very small lighting solutions, solar home system, now microgrid. The first challenge was really to solve the technical gaps. So there were things not available. We have to solve the gaps. We did it. Then we had to solve the integration gap, how to make all the system work together. A microgrid, a mini-grid is not something easy. It's something quite complex, but now I think we have the technology and we can integrate it. Now the big question is how we do it at scale. So it's not one PhD from France, one system integrator from Germany, another a financing guy from Swiss doing it. Is people locally able to do it and do it at scale. So doing it 10 times more than what we are doing today. It is a little bit what is at stake, and it has been confirmed with the KPI shown. So this is one of the challenge, and we have some answers, and we have to get prepared for the next challenge. The next challenge is not to deploy at scale, is to maintain at scale. And a microgrid will be implemented for the next 20 years, and there will be people will have the first activity. They will start with individual activities. They will have new stuff. They will develop new services. Maybe they will get electric vehicle, I don't know, or electric bicycle or whatever. But their needs will change. If we deploy at scale and we are not able to maintain it at scale and to make the evolution at scale, we will completely fail. And this is basically where the new technologies, the new concept can help. And finally, a little bit of maybe of debate on it. I will say that we'll be successful in this journey when we won't speak about off-grid solution, but about how the off-grid solution will merge into a grid, and they will connect to each other. And certainly we'll be successful in this energy access when everybody will be connected to a grid, starting maybe like a grid, and then several grids and grid of grids. So I think we need to start thinking about how to have a compromise between the grid reconciliate the grid and the off-grid and the mini-grid approach.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Hi, Martin Healy. I work for the U.S. government, which may on the surface not look like the most innovative institution in the world, but I'm here to tell you it's not true. What I wanted to describe actually with my time is a little bit about what we're doing, mainly through the Department of Energy's laboratory network throughout the United States to help identify and get solutions to the people that commercialize them and to bring them to market the best, the entrepreneurs and our incubators throughout the United States. The Department of Energy has 17 labs, really world-class. One of them probably, which many of this room know, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. What I wanted to describe is about 3 years ago, they developed an initiative to try to plug directly into the clean incubator network throughout the United States in an actual superarching incubator called Incubate Energy, okay? They were able to tie together 20 incubators within the United States and plug directly into some of the cutting-edge ideas and concepts coming out of the Renewable Energy Laboratory to the people that can actually commercialize them on the ground. Now, the challenge to that whole picture, of course, is you can develop these these ideas within the United States, but how do you get them to the areas, to the regions of the world that need them the most? A lot of the more developed countries, like Canada, Europe, the United States, have these new energy incubators, as well as networks of incubators in order to bring them to market. But the compelling idea or the fact behind it is a lot of these companies are developing not grid-level solutions, but for solutions, these clever applications for areas around the globe that don't have the 100% grid coverage, that need the mini-grids or the weak grid situations. So they need to be able to port those ideas to the laboratory, the real-world laboratories that actually need these applications the most. So I've talked at length with Incubate Energy and these other incubators, and what they need the most are international partnerships, ways to actually port their ideas down to the regions that need them the most. And I call out to my good friends from IRENA that's the kind of role that they're well suited to play, this facilitator role, this ability to bring these ideas, to plug into these international incubators and bring these ideas to the regions that need them the most.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Boubacar Diallo. I'm the founder of Beno Energy. We are a startup, a small startup in France and Togo. Our activity is to develop off-grid projects in Africa, in West Africa mainly, and with a specific scope is the fact that we provide solutions to businesses and entrepreneurs. And we have two complementary activities. One is to offer technical solutions, mainly solar kiosks. And the second one is to digitalize the entrepreneurs on the field. We do that for a simple reason, is that we believe that there's not just a question of energy when we talk about off-grid markets. It's also a question of demand. In the off-grid market, people request energy. But if we want to offer them energy, we need to work also on the way that they can be equipped with equipment to use this energy. And that makes very important to work on demand stimulation. And demand stimulations helps the entrepreneurs to be able to produce more activity and to be able, in this case, to have revenues. And if they have revenues, they have the capacity to pay for what they have. So just an important point about innovation and the discussion that we are going to have. Our company is on the field. We are an operator. So when we discuss with the customers, what we call the customer, I never heard the word innovation. Never. The word that I heard is we want affordable technology, we want affordable energy, and we want quality. In fact, innovation for us is just the translation of the demand of people. And what we see is that if we want to offer affordable energy and quality, you need innovation. But not just innovation in terms of energy. You need innovation in terms of business model, innovation in terms of process, and maybe in the third point, innovation in the terms of technology. But the main point is to think innovation not just as a silo, a kind of silo where you have innovation for the mini-grids, innovation for the for the batteries, innovation for different sectors. In the off-grid market, it's very important to think innovation as a larger level, not just
Sure.
on the topic of energy.
Good point. Innovation is holistic, not just the business model, it's not just the financing model, not just the technology. It's about everything, maybe encompassing across. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation to IRENA. My name is Jan Kloen. I work for Get Invest, which is a new label on an existing program, which is called Africa EU Renewable Energy Cooperation Program. And as you can imagine, we are very glad to have a shorter name now, Get Invest. And it's all about promoting investment in renewable energy in emerging markets. And our activities in the last 3 years have been focused on Africa. And I was invited to talk about innovation. And as I agreed completely with my neighbor that this is a fact of life of all these companies that are providing these services. But I see these innovations at 3 levels. At the company level, what we see through a service, we call it Finance Catalyst. It's an advisory service that helps companies to get access to finance. We've had over 300 applications, and we're actively involved in supporting 40 projects and or businesses. And in this portfolio, we see the innovation at the enterprise level. And this is mainly that pioneers are doing startups and having angel investors and fools and family going into becoming managers and having a vast array of data and trying to figure out what to do with this and be a proper manager of a proper company and to be able to access finance from a regular bank and a regular investor. And that's an innovation that's taking place in each industry, each enterprise individually. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to say, now we have lessons learned and we'll publish a booklet about it. But it's really a type of innovation that we see happening, and people are inventing the wheel as we see it happening. Luckily for my friend Minoru, we do have a number of companies that are also engaging in clean cooking solutions. And we are now, for the first time in a few months, organizing in East Africa a clean cooking investment forum together with the Global Alliance on Clean Cooking, because we believe that there are now deals in the market that investors are looking for. So we apply our B2B matchmaking instruments with these type of companies. Secondly, if you allow me, we see innovation at the inter-enterprise level, where the combination of services, during the introductory remarks already was mentioned, mobile phone companies, but we also see insurance, weather forecasts, all sorts of private consumer goods being channeled through the same networks as the solar home system or the mobile lighting systems. And these combination of companies, they reduce risk significantly on all sides of the equation, and therefore risk reduction means higher probability of growth. And that's really important, these partnerships between companies that you would normally not see. I heard about funeral insurance being sold through the network of solar system. And another example was this weather forecasts. This company, they have this network of stations everywhere around the country. Why not warn farmers that rain is coming or that a dry spell is coming or something of the same tune? And thirdly, I think what is important is the way, and I saw it also one of the questions on the display about this, is how the public sector is supporting the private sector. And this is what we also are involved with in the program, working directly with governments in Africa, how to support and liberalize that market. And what we see is increasingly innovative solutions. My employer, GIZ, it's across the river from here. They are involved in a program called Energizing Development, and especially results-based finance is working really well to get companies to go the extra mile, and then after that has been established, yet the extra mile. And so that results-based finance, rewarding for results, works really well. And secondly, another example that I would like to give on the mini-grid sector is the split assets model. And this cuts right into what Marcus was mentioning about considering mini-grid as an infrastructure. Because if you consider the distribution network a public investment, you already have financed half of your mini-grid. And then the other half, it's still not viable at the moment to completely fund this through private sector. But what the GIZ colleagues have been doing is setting up auctions where a number of locations which are very unlikely to be electrified by the grid are put online, and where entrepreneurs can bid. And the lowest bidder, basically the entrepreneur that has the lowest need for subsidy, they win a concession to run that mini-grid for a certain period of time. And that is combined with relatively loose regulation on the tariff, so that if people make the case that in this location, this will just be my cost of generation, and that is then being audited, then entrepreneurs are able to engage, and it's also the best way to use the public funds. And then maybe emerging things that I see with blended finance, also on the public side, supporting the private sector, which are very promising, are of course instruments like Electrify and EEP going into equity and grants in addition to debt financing. And this is new because 5-10 years ago, you'd only be talking about grants, and grants are gone after they have been awarded to the company. Whereas with equity and debt, there's much more a locus of control. And then a very innovative thing I saw with SIDA is on supporting crowd financing for certain investments where the donor takes some of the guarantee of the crowd financing. So then you, as a public institution, you leverage multi-public investments then together with private sector funding. So I see a lot of innovation, and I think it's very promising. Maybe we'll not get exactly to achieve all the targets of the SDGs, but we'll get a long way, I think.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay, Habiba Ali from Sosai Renewable Energies Company, Kaduna, Nigeria. We are the last mile deployment people. We get solutions to households in communities and rural areas in northern Nigeria especially. And as I listen to all my colleagues up here talk, I'm like, oh God, 9 to 10 years ago when we started the cook stove work, we were thinking of people ascending the energy ladder. And it's been a lot. I mean, at that time when we started the cook stove project, it was the first cook stove project to be registered on the UNFCCC CDM platform. And we were very happy. And we were thinking at that time that, I mean, like 2 years or 3 years down the line, people were going to improve from even using the improved cook stove, which was saving about 80% of wood, and go on to, ascend the energy ladder to maybe kerosene, then LPG, then electricity. But we're still here, and we're even saying 3 billion people still don't have access to cooking, still cook dirty. So, but one thing I realized, I mean, from having worked in cook stoves, and I'll just use my experiences to explain what I think, because in my opinion, innovation is only as good as the impact it makes, and the impact needs to be sustainable. Most times we have a lot of people sit down and, create technologies that are really fascinating. I mean, when they explain to you what it does, it's really very nice, and it could actually change the world tomorrow. But the truth of the matter is when you get it down to the rural communities, the people do not know how to adapt to it. So I think one of the major things we need to be working on, and this is just to make it a very short speech, is to actually re-innovate what we have innovated and, find ways to actually help people adapt to that. And I really appreciate that Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves recently did, I think I will call it a big research in Bangladesh, Kenya, and Nigeria by the Berkeley Air Monitoring Group. And what they are trying to do is work on the behavioral change. Because one thing that we found, I mean, working in the field, is that people look at this shiny new stove and they're very happy to have it. And they pay, which is, for me, I always say, don't think about the cost, but just think about, how to make it a product that they can use. And when they have it, they just keep it there and it's a trophy. So yeah, maybe when the daughter is getting married, they can actually pride to the husband's family that, yes, we also have this nice looking cook stove we bought for X amount. So basically, we need to innovate how to, encourage behavioral change. People have to learn that the technologies are really nice out here, and they are very big. I mean, coming here, I'm like, oh God. And I was very happy when Vimal said it in the morning that some people just want light. I mean, in my country, that's what we'll say. We just want light. That's all I want. I just want to see my neighbor and let my neighbor see me, and maybe, in addition, have a little television. So yeah, if it comes through big data, blockchain, all the back end, they don't really care. They just want to see it. And it is only when they appreciate the technology coming out and they use it that we're going to cross that divide and actually see energy access improve within the shortest period of time.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I get into the questions which are on the list there, and I have some prepared questions, actually I wanted to come back to the panel based on something which was triggered by Dr. Takada in his presentation. He mentioned a stark figure of only 0.2% of investment going into the poorest 10% countries in terms of electrification. Why do you think this is happening? Everybody recognizes that SDG 7 is important. Why is investment not going? And in your impression, what really is that thing we need to do that can change things, that we really see money going into actually making a difference? Anybody wants to take this question? Yes, please, Shalvit.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll start with what I've seen in the market, especially. And unfortunately, because most of the money is coming from Western world, how they look at the business is quite specific. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you find that only a few businesses fit within that spectrum, which is why you find that regardless of whether you're looking at equity or debt or grant, so only a specific number of companies will fit within their profile, and therefore they'll be the ones who will access the money. The other thing is that if you look at the funds that's coming to the sector, it's mostly from private players who are like the impact investors. Okay. Yeah, and so we don't have even like the local banking sector or even the local finance sector participating in financing. They do not recognize the business models. They do not recognize the businesses. They do not understand those businesses. They do not lend to them, and I think that's the bigger also a big problem.
I think. Okay. So, and I think another thing is, I think we also need to innovate or sort of find a way to support the regulations in some of these countries. Because, for example, I'll take my country as an example. We're still battling with the Nigerian government on how to make, implement an already existing, HS code. That's the classification for the products, the solar products that come into the country. Ordinarily, it's 0%, but what you see there is different. It's in reality, when you get to the point, it just depends on the mood of the customs officer that you find there. Currently, I'm fighting with customs, and the solar home kit is now no longer a solar home kit. It's been dissected, the wires are different, the bulbs are different, and, so basically, there needs to be a way to ensure that these people understand the benefits of having energy access beyond, just what they are going to make in the beginning. And when you talk about the financing coming, imagine an investor, most of the money, like she said, comes from international organizations. And then you get these products into the country or whatever, and then it spends, I've got products at the port for about 3 months now. And I have to pay back loans maybe in the next year. And so it gets frustrating for the investors when they start hearing stories, right? So I think from the very beginning, investors need to understand that though they come from, and we really appreciate that they bring the money, but they come from a very organized, regularized countries, but they need to understand that in Africa, it's a bit different, and it could actually go up and down, and the capital really, really needs to be extremely patient. So which...
Exactly.
patience is an innovation in this space. Thank you. Yes, please, Jan,
Yes.
last word on this.
Okay, thanks. I think I completely agree with my two female colleagues on the panel that it's risk perception, yes, but it's also actual risk. Macroeconomically, you put your euro or your dollar into those economies for 10, 15, 20 years, and what will you get out? I have own experience. It was, let's say, monopoly money, as my wife and I call it. I put it in a number of investments in renewable energy in Africa through various platforms. And let's say the return on investment is not really what you like your pension fund to do in 20 years. I lost money, not because the entrepreneur didn't pay back, but because the exchange rate after 3-4 years, it just does funny things. And so investors, banks, they know these risks. They have done other deals. And I think if you want to, let's say, finance a diesel generator in Africa, you can easily do it because there's a relatively short payback time. And the rest of the project financing is about the fuel. But now we're talking renewable energy. And we know it's a many times told story. Upfront investment costs are very high. This includes clean cooking. And that's one of the things. So what our program is trying to do is gather information, gather evidence, build databases together with companies, anonymized, of course, so that we can show what are the real risks. And then maybe the investors don't require an internal rate of return of 25, but can go with 20 or less. And that is already making a big difference for a number of companies that we work with. So there are ways to do it, and it's information, I think.
Good point. So let me come to the first question which is posed by the panel. Is innovation in electricity access, energy access primarily about finance innovation? Is it purely finance which is really limiting us scaling up or really taking the issue forward, or is there more to it? Is it different? Yes, please, Matthew.
Okay, so the second part of the question, was do we still have some technology bottleneck or technology challenges? So the answer is yes, definitively. So what are the challenges? The challenges we are facing is not only having some generators, new generators, renewable, but how to make this work properly and on the long run with some evolutions. So, and to have it done work from the first day is challenging, and to maintain it is challenging. And here there is some innovation, and definitively here we are getting a big help from the new technologies, just to have the microgrid being able to be implemented and operational with the commissioning done by local people, and to be maintained or to be evolutive themselves. So how the system can be optimized remotely using algorithm for the prediction, for the optimization, when to charge a battery, when to discharge, anticipate the failures on the systems, anticipate the maintenance, avoid problems, solve problems remotely, etc., etc. And this is what is required to do it at scale. So it's not purely financing. There are still some technology challenge. It's not the technology itself, but how to put the technology at scale. And it's not about the generation or the storage only. It's about how to integrate, operate, and optimize the use of all energies in the systems. So this is one of our experience, and we are moving on this, but definitively it's not finished.
Good point. It's not just about the batteries or the solar panels. It's how the whole thing is put together in an energy access kind of a scenario. I think the good point that you make. And that's where perhaps some of the technology innovation needs to take place. Let me come to the next question. And this is for some of you who are looking into energy access across continents in Africa and India. How do you compare, Asia? How do you compare your experiences between in Africa and in Asia, let's say. And maybe Dr. Takada also might have some experience on this. Anybody wants to take Dr. Takada? Would you? Okay. Please.
I think from the GOGLA member experience working in Africa and working in Asia, I think it's important to remember that PAYGO has been a hugely innovative business model product that has worked amazingly in East Africa. It's seen huge scale up of solar home systems, huge scale up of energy access. But I think it's important to note that not every technology or innovation or new business model is appropriate to every different market segment. And Asia is very different to Africa. One of the biggest differences and why PAYGO hasn't taken off in places like India as much as it has in East Africa is the lack of mobile money. Mobile money is how PAYGO works. It's it enables the whole business model. That innovation doesn't really exist in India, which means our members use different types of business models, and they might not sound as innovative and fancy as mobile money, but working through MFIs to actually lend directly to households or to help finance startups and to help finance the smaller distributors and manufacturers with India can really help accelerate access in Asia. And that's, different models work for different market segments.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on an application, on an example where utilizing solutions from Asia doesn't necessarily work in Africa. Specifically, we see a number of entrepreneurs that we support on using swarm technology. And this is, of course, at the beginning of the learning curve. But what we can for sure see is that solutions like Solsum in Bangladesh, which were mentioned this morning, solely due to the settlement pattern that we see in most African countries, this will not be applicable because they just live too far away from each other. And so the homestead structure, as we see especially in Southern Africa, also in East Africa, it doesn't really lend itself. You get distances of more than 100 meters with 12 volts. That's going to be very problematic. You will lose more than you will get in your blockchain account.
Absolutely.
And so there's technical limits that stop a number of these applications. And then I must also say that I also do it sometimes. I talk about Africa, but it's really individual countries have their specific circumstances where something works in Rwanda and it will not work in Uganda, for example. So just we have to be careful with talking about Africa as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you.
From an international cooperation perspective, rise of the South-South cooperation is certainly a good thing. But I think this also gives us a challenge. It goes sort of beyond the traditional framework of international cooperation, meaning that Jan and Minoru may not know what exactly happening. That itself is not the problem, so long as we will be able to take advantage of their lessons. But I think we ourselves, international community too, has a lot of job to do to reach out, make sure that we have a coherent way of supporting each other on that one. Just to sort of as a statistics, the official development assistance plays small role, but an important role in policy and enabling frameworks. But it's only 5% of the entire ODA is actually spent on capacity building. Now, when we have such a magnificent systemic changes happening in this energy sector, which require not just bringing technology good thing, but in entire sort of value chain would have to be supported. And that's where I think more soft resources are going to be normally required. I don't think we have seriously looked into it, but I do think this is one of the things that the international community would have to look at.
Thank you. I think that's a very valid argument over here. Now let me come to the next question. Yesterday we heard a lot about blockchain and artificial intelligence and how it can make an impact on renewables and accounting for renewables. How would blockchain helping mitigate some of the risks of credit in the electricity access? Has any of the panelists come across this issue or any experience? I see that 4 likes to this question.
So, yeah. So on my side, we are using and making a little bit of work on innovation on blockchain, but it's a little bit, if you remember my introduction, for going for the next steps when the microgrid will connect to each other and they will, let's say, be connected to a weak grid and they will exchange services to the grid and to each other. As an example, I am producing electricity I don't need, my neighbor is needing electricity, and they don't have the generation. I will exchange it and I create sort of community. So it's something that we are looking and seeing, so energy community when the microgrid are connected to each other. This is something we are a little bit more seeing, in maybe in Asia, because at the end, as said before, let's say there is a grid, even if it's a weak grid, and the microgrid and the energy resources will reinforce. So this is the application on our side. We are seeing for the blockchain. So basically, create an energy community able to exchange service between different people in the community and with the utility with the grid.
Mm-hmm. May I bring here also the experience I've had of some interaction with the company Soulshare in Bangladesh. Now, Soulshare is setting up microgrids in Bangladesh. And what they have done is, instead of this big thing known as blockchain, they've created a kind of private blockchain between the microgrid huts within that little community. So even if there are only 10 huts in that community, those 10 huts are having a kind of a black box which is doing the metering, but localized blockchain, so that it's a shared ledger, so that no one can tamper with the data. But also it helps for local accounting, and they've been fairly successful with that. In fact, there's somebody from Soulshare here attending this conference also. Quite a fascinating solution that they're implementing over there.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so specifically about that question about blockchain kind of mitigating the credit risk, specifically referring to microgrids or mini grids, looking at from an African context, none of the mini grids have been able to attract debt finance, at least not from commercial lenders. And this because we consider them not having proved their business model. And it's because of like the way the grid behaves, the government, they'll give a permit to the mini grid, but then the next day they'll be there bringing the grid. And there's always the risk that, the mini grid operators don't actually own those customers. They can lose them like this. So that's one huge risk. And the other one was, of course, the fact that most of especially the early mini grids are basically centered around just providing lighting, and these are rural households. So the return or the revenue was really small or very low, and therefore the payback period is really long. And for us, as for commercial lenders, without having any history of like a mini grid that has gone through the cycle, then it's very risky. So in my opinion, for such a business model like the mini grid, blockchain will not be the answer, because it's basically, we are just spreading the credit risk maybe to several people, but it's a risk that we as commercial lenders may not take, which it's not mitigated. So it's just migrating that to another person, in my opinion.
Sure. And in my opinion, I think credit risk is not necessarily such a big risk, because those who are actually gaining from electricity, they are definitely interested in paying up. The challenges may lie somewhere else, in terms of not so much as the credit risk as the beneficiary of electricity access going bad, but maybe the business model risk may be there, or even the currency risk. As Jan, you put it, I think you put it in a lighter vein, but I think that's a reality. In India, our currency has devalued about 4% in the last 3 days. Now, what happens in that kind of a situation? So you could invest in Indian electricity access programs in euros, but what happens in such scenarios? And if you had the same currency coming in Indian rupees, it's a totally different scenario. Okay.
Just to complete
Sure.
about this comment, because we are also on the field. So in Togo, we see what you say on the ground in Africa. We see that our customers we don't see financial risk. We don't see direct financial risk. The people have capacity to pay. The main risk that we have in our transaction is the commercial risk. Because with a very high volatility, people cannot, maybe they're going to pay during 3 days, and they are not going to pay during six months. We don't know. There is a big volatility. So blockchain is maybe good to mitigate a financial risk, but not for a commercial risk. I'm more confident with the solution like SolShare, doing more closed blockchains that are more related to the technology, and more close also to the PayGo and so on.
Maybe it's my error. We are talking more about risks. I thought we were going to talk about innovations. So may I bring us back and let's talk about innovations. Let's get some energy going into this. And I see an important question up there. Innovation in policy intervention. So if you can please highlight, any one of you can take a start. What is that policy intervention you think which is really innovative, which has been implemented either in a country or some utility or somebody who's done something specific in policy which you say, hey, this is wonderful, this is working wonders. You all need to listen about this one. Anybody wants to go, and Dr. Takada also, you're equally into this. Julie, we'll start with you. Mm-hmm.
In terms of a policy environment that's enabling, that can really help scale
I'm glad
up.
to see the smiles coming back. Thank you.
This is my topic, policy, not so much finance or blockchain. What we've seen in the countries where energy access has been really scaled up by off-grid solar is we've seen a clear government policy that includes off-grid in the national electrification plans. That sends a clear signal to business and to investors that that particular country is serious about including off-grid. It's serious about supporting it in any way that they can, and they're serious about scaling up energy access within the country. So that's kind of the overarching sort of policy approach that can be taken. Mm-hmm. Other sort of enabling and supportive supporting environment policies that can be put in place are things like VAT exemptions or import duty exemptions. You know, this is an emerging market. It hasn't been around for all that long. The key to scaling up energy access in a lot of these countries is affordability, and anything that can be put in place, any policy that can be put in place that helps with affordability, helps scale up access.
Could you give an example of a country which is doing this and which is actually, kind of remarkable progress in terms of policy they're doing?
Yeah, sure. I think Kenya is the obvious example. It's probably the one where the off-grid market has really taken off, where there's a supportive government in place. And that's not to say that, our members and RA and GOGLA sort of don't have to continually work with governments to encourage them to keep maintaining those positive enabling environments. But I think the proof is in the pudding for Kenya. Those sorts of national planning things can really help accelerate that. I think also just quickly one more point. It's been mentioned, but diverse and more financing is what's needed in the sector, and any sort of policy approach taken by a national government or by a regional bloc to help support that can really help. So we've talked a little bit about the financing risks that are out there, but what we really need to see is we need to see financing not only from international donors, we need to see financing from local banks in local currency to really help the startups, to help those domestic companies that are really sort of pushing to help try and scale up and build this market. There's enough opportunity to go around for everyone. We've seen the stats, we've seen what we have to achieve by 2030, but what we need is more diverse and more funding going into this sector.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please, Ms.
Okay, I was going to say that one thing that I see that policy needs to do is to actually regulate properly the financing aspect. For example, in Nigeria, we don't have the mobile money as well. And it's one of the reasons why, as good as pay-as-you-go is, it's still a very clumsy process to get our monies back. And luckily, in the most recent time, there's been a certain program that started, and they're trying to find a way to make omni branches happen so that you can have like small financing units, using maybe POS or something in like as many places as possible. So we're already talking about 50,000 agents across 16 states. So things like that, and getting the government to also understand. I mean, at the point, mobile money started in Nigeria, but the central bank, put up some other, I think, strategies that made it not to keep going. So, yeah, I think it's high time governments really made a conscious effort to really make it easy for entrepreneurs and everybody in this clean energy space to make things happen.
Sometimes it feels like a policy steeplechase that you have to go through, one thing and then the next one and the next. Jean, especially if you want to celebrate some of the innovations you see which are really making a difference.
It goes back to Nigeria as well, because what I just mentioned, what Nigeria is showing is that for especially this is in a mini-grid space, if you have loose regulation, you communicate clearly to the communities that they are not going to get electricity for the national tariff. This is very, very important. This takes a lot of pressure off of the entrepreneur. Also, if it's time for the next elections or the elections after those. So you have loose regulations. You acknowledge that certain areas are more difficult to electrify than others. And this is also how we electrified in Europe 200-300 years ago. It started with small communities that had their own pricing and their own systems, even their own technologies, and then later on they connected. And so for rural areas, I think Nigeria is a very good example. Ogun State is specifically has adopted a number of policies which give room for entrepreneurs. And what we are now doing is trying to disseminate these experiences. We just sponsored Zambians and Ugandans to come and see for themselves in Nigeria, and we hope to replicate this in the coming year with a number of other countries where off-grid electrification through mini-grids is really an opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Takada, anything you want to share about your experience of a country or a specific policy which is a major innovation helping energy access?
As a United Nations staff member, I refrain from... Joking aside, I think China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, those countries already sort of started. Bangladesh, for example, another example on that. But let me say that on the macro scale, this year we had a first review at the United Nations of the progress toward SDG 7. 46 countries submitted their own what they call voluntary national reviews of all SDGs. Reviewing all of them, we realized that almost all the 46 voluntary national reviews cites their specific policy provisions, new targets with regards to electricity access. Less than 10% of them cites anything related to clean cooking. So there's a sort of quite, I don't know whether it is just a reporting issues, perceptions, I don't know, or whether this reflects reality or not. But then just sort of this is one of the things that we sort of realized.
Okay, thank you. There are a lot more questions, but I want to come back to something that I had thought was really important for going forward. We all recognize that entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs are critical and core to any kind of grassroots movement, or really bringing about a change at a mass scale for electrification and energy access. What do you think can be done? What are those innovative practices? What are those innovations that you have seen happening, or you don't see happening, but they must happen to really energize entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial spirit of the people to bring about energy access? Question to the entire panel. How do you bring the entrepreneur out into this thing and say, yes, I want to bring my energy and enthusiasm? Because my feeling is, if an entrepreneur jumps in, he brings with him innovation. Nobody would come in to just do the same thing which others have done.
I think, from my own experience, just make it easy to do the business. Seriously, with a lot of bottlenecks coming from the government. Sometimes I look at it like you see someone drowning and you jump in to save that person, and once you get the person and you're trying to throw that person, and the person is halfway out and you are almost like coming up, the government just pushes you back in. So yeah. for me, if they could actually make it easy for us to run the business, I think we'll win.
Make the policy framework and get out of the way.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry. Marcus and Matthew?
Perhaps just a point. I mean, we spoke about the aspect that patient capital and all of this, but this also means that we accept losses wherever. I mean, this is just part of the game. If there is 1 out of 100, sometimes it's already a good result. I mean, there are very, very few, but very, very huge companies these times on the world, which started like this. But the point which I wanted to make is, now we have been not limiting ourselves, but we spoke a lot about energy access as such, also business related to energy. But also I think what I would encourage definitely all the countries where we want to focus on is to think about what is their key competitive advantage in terms of their general strengths on the macroeconomic scale. Yeah, meaning, is it only the primary sector? I hope not, really. I would really encourage everybody to think about in each country, where's the strengths in this country? Is it only using renewable energy power, which is fair enough, but is there not a chance to grow an industry which adds more value, and then not to allow anybody importing stuff which nobody wants in that country, but rather to produce by themselves, and also to encourage bilateral trade with the bordering countries? Because you start there a bit to develop your models, to get the confidence, the entrepreneurship, the courage, and or also the spirit by yourself, and growing from there, I think then continental-wide, but maybe even abroad. And so it's just another aspect, because you want to pick up a different aspects, and I think it's very important really to see maybe there are some certain strengths in the country which you should put and support a bit more to make them happen even worldwide, or at least on the country and local level. Yeah.
Okay, good. Matthew and then Shalmit.
Yeah, so I think related to entrepreneurship, and I would say every day, but almost every day or every hours, I receive curriculum from people wanting to work in this area. So it's very attractive. People they have very good ideas. Some of them want to put something in marketplace. They want to electrify on another way. They want to do different package with water pumping, etc. People have a lot of good ideas, and there is a lot of entrepreneurship, and that's very glad to do this. One thing that will be certainly good is, on one side, to not have roadblocks, obviously, on the regulation, because people want to innovate, and if they are blocked, it doesn't work. But as well, they need to have great professionals then when it's time to deploy and put in place. And here, great professional mean education program, engineering school, etc., in the different geography local, to be able to support and to sustain this effort. And certainly, this will be a key factor in the success.
Okay. Yes, please, Shalmit.
For me, I would say it's addressing the energy needs of the people. I mean, we talk of, people talk of energy ladder, but really is there a ladder? Because I think in the first place, when a rural population or rural household has energy needs, and how the ladder comes in is because the industry started innovating, starting, for example, with the lantern, then we went to the solar home system, and then they brought in solar home system with the TV, and now we have solar for irrigation. So it's not really there is a ladder. The need was still there initially, and therefore the entrepreneur still has a market to address to meet all the energy needs of the population, and it's a big population, like we saw in the numbers presented.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. I see that we have now only about 14 minutes left, and I want to bring it all together. So may I request each one of you, what is that one parting thought you would like to leave with everyone? Maybe 2-3 sentences most. That forget about all that we have discussed in the session. No, don't forget about it. Okay, remember all that, but one point which is, in your opinion, from your whole experience, from your heart, you want to say, all that you have remembered, but this is one point you definitely must remember, because this is the key to innovation in energy access. And maybe we can start with Marcus again and come with Dr. Takada. 2 or 3 sentences, that one big ticket item that you can say, If you really want to be successful, do this.
Yes, with pleasure. Many aspects, of course. But so there's been one 2-year project on our side with OFIT, the OPEC Foundation, where we implemented 3 mini-grids in Mozambique and Mali, and no, even 4 in Bangladesh and India. And I think one of the key learnings here was that there was an approach between an international player, in this way a project developer from Spain, TTA, and then a local player, for example, Ensol, to work together, but with a community. Yeah, so what I would like to address here basically is whatever the result was, which was, of course, implementing to make it operational, all of this, but was not to work in silos, to work together to find solutions. And I think this is a very important point also when I look into this round. We all have our mandate to carry out. And sometimes what I miss is that it would be good to also not only follow the programs which we have to follow, but also to try to integrate them more. Thank you.
Not work in silos, integrate, bring everybody together. Yes, please.
And continuing, picking from his point of working together, we have so many programs, especially from Europe, which are operating in Africa. And most of them come and create a new program, new people who are new to that environment, while some of us are already there. I mean, myself, I'm from the off-grid area, and I've been lending to African companies. I've been lending in the sector. So we do have companies that you can partner with instead of starting a new institution that will probably go to a specific type of businesses because, first of all, they are not on the ground. So working together is one point, I would say, getting it from him and adding my few cents there. The other one is back to the issue of addressing needs. I think the big thing now is productive use, cold storage. We have people who are doing, and most of them are in pilot stage, but I really think that would scale, this would scale energy access. And also, not just energy access, but also give the rural population an opportunity to improve their economic situation because it provides income-generating opportunities. So cold storage, small production, solar for irrigation, solar water pumping for drinking. So all those solutions I think would really be great. And at the very center of it is energy. So innovation in energy and giving access to energy, which then opens up a whole spectrum of addressing needs that are already there in the rural population. That's all I can say. And of course, working together with people who are in that area. So localized solutions will be good.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the key message from me is really to scale up to the levels that we need by 2030, as shown by the presentation we saw earlier. We need to maintain and improve affordability in whatever way that we can do so. So any policy intervention, any financial intervention, any sort of innovation on that front needs to help maintain and improve affordability because that is the one key component that is required to scale up access. I think the other one is also to keep the high quality of product that is out there at the moment. So sort of encouraging governments to adopt internationally harmonised standards on the quality of the product builds people trust in solar, helps them sort of get onto that energy ladder, energy staircase with a small scale lighting pico product, but then encourages them to stay on that trajectory to climb that ladder with further sort of high quality products that are out there to provide the rest of their energy services required. So I think for me it's all about affordability and high quality.
Thank you.
Okay, so I fully agree with the affordability and the high quality. What I would maybe also add is to do it at scale means to have local people, local professionals able to handle, to deploy the technology. And let's get prepared for the time of the system will be having a lot of evolutions, and let's also be prepared for the short time when the microgrid will connect to each other and they will eventually connect to the grid. It will happen certainly, and we have to reconciliate the grid and the microgrid part. And this is where new technologies, as we have been discussing, will enter.
Well, I would just say relatively simply, find where the best ideas are being generated, find the people that are generating the ideas, and develop ways, find ways to get them to the places that need them the most. and that includes some of the enabling ideas that we've talked about here, the financing piece, the policy tuning in countries, but be able to identify and get them to where they need them the most.
Thank you.
Well, maybe 3 ideas. The first one is that innovation is about people first. So let's try to think first about the people and the demand, what they want. This is what I said at the beginning. The second point is that I think that good innovation is innovation we don't see. If you don't see the innovation, is that you are doing good things. The third point is that, as I said also, innovation is holistic. So in the off-grid market, you don't have to think only about the innovation in the energy sector, but you need also to see what is happening in the telecommunication sectors. You need also, from our experience, from our direct experience, we are looking a lot to the innovation in the cold storage, because there is, in terms of equipment for the solar system and for DC technology, there is a lot of things that are happening in the cold storage equipment. So it's things that are very important. And the last point that is not related to innovation is the fact that today, from our perspective in Togo, our main challenges are more logistic challenges to have products that arrive to the country. We have problems with the roads that are not good. We have also problems to collect data. So we are talking a lot about blockchain, intelligence, artificial intelligence. But if you don't have a good telecommunication system to collect data, all these technologies doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
And the last point is also we have challenges and issues that are related to simply to infrastructure, the roads. If you need to go to one place to another more than 5 hours to solve a problem with the system, that's also a big issue. So I think that we need at the same time to have a long view and a high vision about what we want to succeed in the future, but at the same time it's important to look to what is happening on the ground and on the field.
Thanks. This is a good ending because it cuts into the point that I wanted to make, that about the long view, because what we sometimes fail to realize, I believe, is that we are talking about an energy transition, and an energy transition, we very often talk about the developed countries, they're in energy transition, but Africa, or less developed part of Asia, they're also in an energy transition. We talk about access to energy, but the people have energy. They buy dry cells, they buy candles, they buy kerosene, and it's also an energy transition. I'm from the Netherlands, where suddenly we found this huge amount of gas, and the women had to be convinced that this was a safe fuel, and it took decades. It took decades to build that infrastructure and to let everyone cook on gas. And guess what happens in the last year? Our government decides to close the thing down. And now we have to convince, with less intensity, luckily, the people to switch back to electricity or other forms. The point I'm trying to make is that I've been working in this field of line of work now for 2 decades, and I wrote my master thesis on business models for solar energy in Zimbabwe in '98. And we looked at credit sales, we looked at fee for service, and we looked at cash sales, but the pay-as-you-go didn't exist because there was not even a mobile phone. And so we worked with TL lights, which were the predecessor of the CFLs, and now we have LEDs that you drop them and they still work. And all these innovations, they are steps in this energy transition, and therefore I'm very positive. The innovations on the technical side, we have to appreciate the costs will come down, risk for companies will come down slowly, and then we can really engage in this big curve towards full energy access. Thanks.
Like I said before, there's so much happening in the technological innovation space. I mean, before we get used to one solar light, another one is out and with different capabilities than the other ones. So innovation in technology, I don't think is the huge issue, but the innovation in adoption, sorry. And I think one way we could actually ensure this happens is if in that person who is technologically driven, there is some sort of softness. I'm looking at technology as hard, and to adapt some humanity into it and understand that this thing is being developed for people to use in places where they don't even have the most basic that you have. So you need to understand and maybe dig deep and run it as a business. I mean, I remember when IRENA sent a couple of entrepreneurs from West Africa on the Prosper incubator in Bangalore and Burkina Faso some 5 years back. And one of the things we found when we got to India was the way they were doing their own renewable energy deployment will never work. For example, in Nigeria, take a battery to charge somewhere and bring it back, it won't work. So you need to understand what are the demands from the grassroots. So because innovation will always be only as good as the impact it makes.
With a lot more options on the table and so many people with a lot of enthusiasm coming in this sector, I remain very optimistic that SDG 7 can be achieved. Mm-hmm. I think global momentum is on our side. So what we have to do is that we bring that momentum to accelerate actions where things are already happening, and also bring that momentum to the places and issues where momentum is currently lacking. And if we can collectively work together to make that happen, I believe that 2030 will be in a different world.
Excellent. First of all, join me in a round of applause for the panelists. I think we have an excellent panel, which did a great job.
And thanks to our moderator, too.
Thank you. I must say that this is especially a bonus for me. I was looking for maybe 9 points. I ended up with 13. So you all go back with 4 extra points from what I got. And just to quickly sum up what we're talking of here, and the key takeaways from this session, key innovations or ideas to really connect with the issue of unleashing innovation in energy access. Of course, we started with Marcus saying, don't work in silos. Any kind of silos will just take away from doing good, meaningful work. Look at electricity for productive use, not just for lighting a bulb somewhere. Of course, that is a great step up, but think of electricity for productive use. That's where it gives people the capacity to earn and then spend a lot more on whatever they want to do with that. A localized solution, I think the word local came up in 4 or 5 of your comments. So have a big vision, think global, think big, think of cutting edge, think of blockchain, but also think local. Don't forget your feet when you're looking up. I think that came out very clearly out here in the session. Ensure product quality and build, because that's where the trust is. I know of horror stories in India and in some places in Africa that I've visited, where people, the governments, the local municipal corporations spent a lot of money on rural electrification with solar panels. The very fact that the solar panels were not fixed properly and come the first storm, they blew away. The solar wafers cracked, and that was the end of... So what ended up happening? The technology gets blamed for it. And so we end up losing trust in the technology. So somewhere build trust, and for trust you need to follow the right standards and right quality measures over there. Goes without saying, make it affordable. I think sometimes I have this angst against some of my very worthy friends in Europe and other developing economies. And especially when I talk to engineers, we come up with great ideas, great solutions. But when I say, well, is this affordable? And there's a blank look. What is this term called affordability? Please make sure it is affordable. And that's the #1 criterion for getting into energy access in developing economies. Money is a scarce resource. Even if it is sovereign debt, the governments are very careful these days. I know in India, it's not easy to take sovereign debt, especially when it comes in dollars and the Indian currency is depreciating. Going forward, we also talked about looking at scale and maintaining scale. That is important to go forward. And the best ideas are not just to look at scale, but ensuring that you maintain that scalability over there. I think, Martin, you mentioned about people, that it's about people end of the day. It's not about technologies and business model. You're dealing with people, with humanity, with the human feelings. And you're actually trying to impact people's lives. And that is, I think, at the core of the issue. You really want to make sure that you are creating an inclusive environment where people get energy, but it also energizes them in more ways than just giving them a light bulb. Having a long view but working local, that came out again. Having a vision, being human, as you put it. And I think Dr. Takada sums it up very well when he said, there is a lot of enthusiasm, there are a lot of people getting into this. Momentum is on our side. What we need to do is wrap it up all together and say, let's accelerate. I think that's where we are. And with this, thank you so much. That concludes this session. I really want to, once again, a round of applause for the panelists and all of you for the good questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.